There you go. So leave meeting now before I start talking. Run, run. I'm pretty sure the only reason I actually got invited was Tim's hoping I'll tell the story of dropping a kid in the river, pushing him out and calling it a baptism. It wasn't a baptism. It was a very first Forest. Well, it wasn't my Forest church, wasn't Lincoln Forest Church. It was one of our others. And one of our kids did, it was February, and they did slip into the water, and we did ush them back out, and we did dry them with the towels that we had remembered to bring. We did feed them hot chocolate, and we sent them home. We didn't really call it a baptism. Well, only when we were joking. But all of the best things actually begin with a baptism. And actually, that's where you are as well. You're at the start of your baptism by fire. Okay. Because you're at that moment when God has already called you. You wouldn't be here if God hadn't already called you. Okay. Who, me? You've already answered that question. You've shown up. Okay. So God has already called you, and God does, like, he showed up in a flaming tree, to this guy that was trying to run away and said, "No escape, mate. Here I am." And that's kind of what being a pioneer of fresh expressions person is a little bit like. It's that journey where we don't quite know where we're going, but we know we're being called. And that's how my journey started. I had no intention of becoming a facilitator of a Forest church. I did know I liked doing stuff outside. I did know I had a lot of friends that were on the edges of community and liked being outside and liked walking and other stuff like that. I did know lots of other stuff. And I went and spoke to someone, and they said, so I actually went to someone and said, there've been an East Midlands Forest church, which was very much more pagan centric than I was particularly happy with at that time. But I knew I wanted to do something like that. So I went and saw a spiritual advisor. That's my tradition. So that's what I did. And they said, maybe not a Forest church. Have you heard of this thing called Contemplative Fire? And there's this Quiet Garden network. Have you thought about that? Because that was much more gentle. Because obviously I am a much more gentle person. Can you tell that? So I went to this Quiet Garden day. It was my birthday. It was lovely. And it was absolutely fantastic. And I walked out of there knowing I wanted to be a contemplative fire companion, but even more convinced that I wanted to set up a Forest church. So I then went and had a conversation with my friend that had led the East Midlands Forest Church. He was doing a day of different spiritual testing expressions. And during that, there was a labyrinth we could walk, and he'd got some what was called a Jesus deck. And he did a meditation, a guided meditation. That's the word I'm looking for. And during the guided meditation, it became very apparent that I was going to start Forest Church, because Jesus appeared in the meditation. I know I sound normal, it's lovely. You can be fresh expression pioneering and totally normal. Some of us aren't. I had this image of Jesus. The meditation was on the wedding at Cana, and we were I was one of the servants pouring water, and as the water hit, and it was water, literally as I poured the jug of water came out. As it hit other people's glasses, it turned to wine. At the end of the mine it did anyway. At the end of the meditation, Matt, my friend, said to it, you can pour yourself a glass and taste of it. And I poured it, and everyone else's had turned to wine, and mine was still water. But it was the best water I'd ever drunk in this meditation. Lovely sparkling water. I was still a bit miffed, so I went back to do the washing up. And this Jesus did a chad around the door. Literally, I kid you not. He chatted me around the door. And I'm washing this jug up, and I looked at him in this meditation, and he said to me, "What are you doing with the jug?" And I went, "I'm washing it up, Lord." And he went, "Well, don't put it down. There's still more work to do." And at that point, I knew I had to stop wobbling and saying, maybe, if, perhaps. and I needed to get on with it. So 3 weeks later, I put an invite out onto Facebook saying, I will be at this place at this time. If anyone's interested in Forest Church, quick synopsis of what I thought Forest Church might be. If anyone's interested, I'll be at this place. Show up, we can talk about it and see where we go from there. 12 people showed up, honestly, 12 people. Half of them were actually in ministry already, but they wanted something different than the services they were at, somewhere where they could go, where they didn't have to be the minister. Half of the people were just interested. And at the end of that session, I gave them little bits of things which had all different descriptions of different Forest churches all over the place, and said, what do you want? If we're going to do this, what do you think it looks like? And by the way, I'm not leading it. That wasn't true. 5 years down the line, and I still end up doing my fair share of leading, or facilitating, as I like to call it, because one of these days, one of that bunch is taking over. They do anyway. It's not kind of structured in that way. At the end of that, we had walked away from that table 2.5 hours later. We walked away knowing that we would be meeting once a month, except for August, because that was bank holidays and everyone was on holiday. We would meet once a month on the 4th Sunday of the month. We would do a walk, a mindful walk. It's not mindful, we chatter all the way around. You know that story of Emmaus where Jesus is where Jesus and them are constantly talking as they walk? That's our Forest Church. It's meant to be a bit quiet sometimes, but mostly it's just chatter. We do that, and then on the solstices and the equinoxes, we have what we call a meet. And that's actually when we steal one of the bird hides at the place that we're at. We don't ask permission, we just show up at it and take over. We steal one of the bird hides, we bring some food and drink, and we do, at that point, we do get quiet. We do a much more mindful activity, but always the point of this is we don't necessarily use, so I felt really bad because you were going on about Bible stories, and I realized we don't use a lot of Bible stories. We'll begin with a prayer, we'll begin with a theme, and normally there's at least one verse from the Bible, but then we walk and we let God talk to us through the nature and through the conversations we have with each other. So what I'd say to you is, if you are here, that's because God has already called you and you already know it. Secretly, you already know it. Stop trying to wriggle. It didn't work for Jonah, it won't work for you. Right? So you just need to accept the fact that you have been called. Sit there. What fills you with passion? What is that one thing God is saying? And if your worry is, I don't have a building, that's fine. Find a bit. And Forest Church, by the way, doesn't have to take place in a forest. It can take place in an urban park. It can actually look like a prayer walk around an urban estate, occasionally stopping at the green patches you might find around your urban estate, looking for daisies. Yes, I have done that. It's not quite as good as being out in the wild, but it works just as well if needs be. So find that place, find that thing that actually God is calling you to do, and just do it, because you will find every excuse not to. But if you are here, you've already answered that call. You know this is your job to do. So don't wriggle. And if the kids fall in the water, push them out, give them towels, feed them hot chocolate, and call it baptism. Because that's what it is. It's not their baptism. That will be your baptism. That's your moment when God says, you can do this. Is that 6 minutes? Can I shut up now?
Melanie, thank you so much. Absolutely fantastic. So if you've got questions for Melanie in terms of what it is that she's